Good morning. My name is Julia Rady. I am the chair of the Toronto Preservation Board. We have quorum, so I'm now calling meeting 18 to order. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Today's meeting is being held by video conference and is also being live streamed online at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. Although we may be meeting in different locations today, the Preservation Board would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. If you are registered to speak at today's meeting, please listen for me to call your name. I will call speakers in the order they appear on the list. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Toronto Preservation Board at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. Members, the City Clerk has provided all agenda materials on toronto.ca/council. As a reminder, please submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at hertpb@toronto.ca to help with motions. At this time, are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you do have an interest, please raise your hand or unmute your mic and indicate the item number and the nature of the interest. Seeing none, we will proceed. Could I please have a motion to confirm the minutes from our meetings on April 24th, 2024 and May 7th, 2024? Moved by Jeff. All those in favor, please. And the motion carries. Thank you. Let's now proceed with the agenda review, including some new items. The first item is PB 18.1, 26 Millwood Road, Notice of Intention to Designate a Property under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There are public speakers registered on this item, so I will hold it. The next item is PB 18.2, 1117 Queen Street West, alterations to and demolition of heritage attributes of a designated property. There's a presentation available to us if we want to hear it. Would anybody like to hold this item? Seeing none, would anybody like to move the recommendations in the staff report? Paul, all those in favor, please? Motion carries. Moving on to the next. PB 18.3, 135 Roxborough Drive, alterations to a designated heritage property in the North Rosedale Heritage Conservation District. There are public speakers registered on this item, so it will be held. The next is PB 18.4, 98 Highland Avenue, refusal of alterations to a designated heritage property in the North Rosedale Heritage Conservation District. There is a presentation from Heritage Planning staff if we would like to hear it. Does anybody want to hold this item? Seeing none, we have before us an item. Would anybody care to move the recommendations in the report? Jeff, all those in favor? Motion carries. On to the next. The next item is PB 18.5, 1420 Yonge Street, demolition of heritage property, a refusal. There is a presentation from Heritage Planning staff available if you would like to hear it. Would anybody like to hold this item? Seeing none, would anybody like to move the recommendations in the report? I'll move the recommendations. All those in favor? Motion carries. The next item is PB 18.6, 639, 641, 645, 649, and 651 Yonge Street. Alterations to and demolition of attributes on designated heritage properties under Part 4, Section 33 and 34 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and authority to enter into a heritage easement agreement. There is a presentation from Heritage Planning staff available if the board would like to hear it. Does anybody want to hold this item? Would anybody care to move the recommendations in the report? Karash, all those in favor? Motion carries. The next item is PB 18.7, 123 Winford Drive. Refusal of application for alterations to the attributes and demolition of a building and heritage attributes on a designated heritage property under Part 4, Sections 33 and 34 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There are public speakers registered on this item, so it will be held. Then we have item PB 18.8, 2991 and 2993 Dundas Street West, inclusion on the Heritage Register. We have speakers registered on this item, so it will be held. Then we have PB 18.9, resignation of a member from the Toronto Preservation Board. There is a letter from the city clerk indicating that the city's clerk's office received a notice that Robert Alsop resigned from the Toronto Preservation Board effective April 14th, 2024, after 2 amazing terms with us. There are no recommendations in this letter. We need a motion to receive this information. I'll make that motion. All those in favor? Motion carries. And thank you, Robert. You were a pleasure to work with. We will now go back to item PB 18.1, 26 Millwood. We have a report from city staff. Do we care to hear the staff report? Or shall I proceed to our speakers? Seeing, okay, so let's proceed to, we have one speaker on this item. Is Sharon here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Sharon,
thanks.
you have 5 minutes, and we'll
Okay.
indicate when you get close to the end of your time.
Okay, thanks. Yes, good morning. My name is Sharon Maurer. A couple of you know me as a member of the North York Preservation Panel, but today I'm speaking to you as the chair of Heritage for the South Eglinton Davisville Residents Association. I became familiar with this house at 26 Millwood back in 2017 when I did a Jane's Walk focused on the history of Yonge and Davisville. I was fortunate to have access to a Davisville Walk booklet that was written by the North Toronto Historical Society in the 1980s. This booklet has proved to be very informative to me over the years. As I mentioned in my letter, this property is a rarity because it's one of only about 7 buildings dating back to the late 1800s that still exist in our Davisville community. Its original owner was one of the most prominent members of the Davis family. He took charge of the family's pottery business after his father's death, and with the advancement of food refrigeration, it affected their pottery business, which was focused on pottery storage containers. And Joseph was innovative and switched to producing decorative pottery. He also had a very busy public life as a postmaster, the Justice of the Peace, town councillor, and a term as mayor of North Toronto. I'd like to thank Heritage staff for their comprehensive research. I always learn a few interesting things by reading their reports. I was glad to see that the slate shingles were listed as a heritage attribute. A local resident pointed out the slate roof to me on that Jane's Walk years ago. In recent years, the house has been used as a construction site office for a neighboring condo building and has remained vacant ever since then. Excuse me. I find it a little unpleasant to think about dirty work boots tromping around in what was once an elegant home of a prominent family. Going forward, I would like to see a nice restoration of this old house and show the respect that it deserves as an important part of our community's heritage. So we strongly support this intention to designate 26 Millwood Road. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Do we have any questions of our speaker? Seeing none, do we have any questions of staff? Alex.
Perhaps not really a question, but just to thank staff for the very prompt response in this case. It's not in our area in North York, but I am a member of the North Toronto Historical Society, and I've been familiar with this house for many years. And it was only by a fluke, I think it was the last council meeting, one of our North Toronto, or rather North York panel members happened to spot an item on the agenda which called for the demolition of this property. And that's when the fire engines were called, and again, thanks to Heritage for responding so quickly to this. And I hope, like Sharon, that this house will be preserved in a respectful condition. Thanks.
Good dovetail or segue into discussion amongst ourselves. So that's good. It was an excellent report. Are there any questions of staff? Any other discussion amongst ourselves then? Seeing none, we have a staff report with recommendations before us. Would anybody care to move those recommendations? Alex, all those in favor, please. Motion carries. Moving on to our next item, PB 18.3, 135 Roxborough Drive. We have a presentation from staff. Would anybody care to hear that before we move on? Jeff, absolutely. I turn it over to planning staff, please, and thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Amir Nisan. I'm a planner with the Development Review Team here at Heritage Planning. So the application brought before us is alterations to a designated heritage property in the North Rosedale Heritage Conservation District for 135 Roxborough Drive. Next slide, please. So this property is located in North Rosedale HCD. Under the plan, it is classified as a C-rated property, serving as a building of contextual significance and contributing to the heritage character of the district. Next slide, please. This is a Georgian Revival building clad with red brick. As you can see in the photos, the applicant is seeking to apply a cream white lime wash paint to the existing masonry. Next slide, please. These are just some more detailed photos showing the extent of the alterations and what the applicant is applying for. Staff note that the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada do not recommend the painting or coating of masonry that has been historically unpainted or uncoated. Staff are of the opinion that this does not comply with the North Rosedale HCD plan or the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. And for the reasons outlined in the report, staff are recommending refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker on this item, Rodney Gill. Good morning. You'll have 5 minutes and we'll indicate when you're getting close to the end of your time.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to the board. I also note that my clients, Tessa Virtue and Morgan Riley, are both here today, and they were also hoping to speak to the matter, although at less length than myself. My clients are people who care about heritage. They're people who care about the craftsmanship, the character, and all of the things that come along with an older home. And that's what drew them into 135 Roxborough. They were taken by its charm, and they indeed even committed to the prior owner of the property that they would keep that charm and character of the home while tastefully updating it. And that brings us to why we're here today. My clients would like to alter the building by applying a lime wash paint to the exterior bricks, and they already have permission to go ahead and paint the front of the house, and I'll get to that in a moment. They believe that not only will this improve the aesthetics of the building, but it's going to facilitate this being their forever home. They want to take good care of this home, and they want it to survive for many, many years in a very good quality and condition. The properties of a lime wash are such that they protect the brick exterior from penetration of water, and they also protect it from UV. The lime wash has antibacterial and antifungal properties, which will help with the long-term viability of the structural integrity of the building. And it's also going to serve an important purpose, which is dealing with deterioration on one of the side walls of the building, where there's had to be patches and repairs on the brickwork, and it's left it in a discolored and deteriorated condition. So that's part of the impetus for proposing this lime wash. The color is a vanilla milkshake, which is it's an off-white. It's a very tasteful color. And as part of the application, what we've put in is a photo study, which illustrates that there's 30 homes in the North Rosedale Heritage Conservation District in close proximity to 135 Roxborough, which have had paint applied to their exterior brick. This is to speak to the character of the community and the Heritage Conservation District Plan itself. The staff report does go into that a bit, suggesting that the painting took place prior to the HCD coming into effect, and also noting that some of those houses were not rated. In reviewing the staff comments, it seems to us that the primary concern is that the solid and permanent presence of the building could be compromised by applying the lime wash, and then reference to what Mr. Nissan had referred to in the standards and guidelines in terms of the recommendation for painting brick. We suggest to the board, through you, Madam Chair, that applying the lime wash will not undermine the character of this building whatsoever, or the character of the HCD area. Indeed, the permanence and the stolid appearance of it will be supported by having this brick protected. It's not to deviate from the character of the neighborhood by applying this. My clients do take issue with the reports noting that this is red brick. It's actually brown. And the way the HCD has been referred to in Heritage Planning's report, I think it's just slightly off in terms of how it refers to red brick. The actual reference is a bit different. It notes that it's about stone brick and masonry, and it does note in parentheses that there is a predominance of red brick, but it's not that red brick itself is to be protected.
20 seconds.
And just thank you. And just conscious of the time, what we'd like to leave the board with is that this is meant to be an enhancement of the building by applying a protection to the brick that will support its preservation in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just seeking a little clarification just because make sure that all of our speakers are registered that we need to hear. Matthew?
Madam Speaker, Sorry, Madam Chair. Two people have joined us today. I think as the previous speaker has just mentioned as well. They'd reached out to us this morning. It's sort of up to you as the chair, or you as the board, if you want to allow them here. We try to make some allowance for this as well, something similar in a committee room or somebody who's attending and they do want to speak. We can register them. I believe we have their information if they do want to speak.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
that's what we're here for.
Okay.
So I think who do we have? I think we've got Ms. Virtue, and I've got a long list of names beside me, but do you want to speak first? You have 5 minutes. Oh, you're together, even better.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for making the time for us. We apologize for the last-minute request. I'm Tessa Virtue.
I'm Morgan Riley, and we are the homeowners of 135 Roxborough Drive.
And we'll be brief, as Mr. Gill so eloquently laid out many of our sentiments. We just wanted to add the human element of the fact that this is indeed our forever home. The moment, well, quite truthfully, the moment you resigned in Toronto, we knew that we would put roots down, and our dream was always to be in North Rosedale. The moment we walked through 135, we totally fell in love with it. It felt like every corner had a cherished memory, every wall had a story. We met the previous owner who had the home in her family for 60 years. And as Rodney intimated, we made a promise to her that we would do our utmost to maintain the integrity, the charm, the character of this home. So while it needed some structural updates, we have, taken some in really thoughtful care and consideration in our renovations. We've basically put it back the way it was, with those curved walls, the unique winding staircase, and we want to respect the neighborhood in every way. Mr. Gill mentioned we're old souls. We own a 1800s heritage deemed farmhouse in Caledon and a home in London that is over 100 years old as well. So this is familiar territory, and it's a true passion of ours. We want nothing more than for 135 Roxborough to live up to its fullest potential. I can assure you that if it was a beautiful red Rosedale brick home, we would leave it as such, because that was always Morgan's dream, especially coming from Vancouver. Unfortunately, it is decrepit and brown and crumbling in areas. So the lime wash will serve to protect the condition of the home, hopefully for decades to come. And we so thank all of you for your time and attention. Thank you for your consideration on this matter. It is deeply, it's so important to us and to our future, and it truly means a lot to us. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've had 2 speakers on this, so just while we have you on, and then we'll go back to Mr. Gill, do we have any questions? Jeff?
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering about this material, cladding, lime wash. I'm wondering, is this paint or is it something else? Because if it's paint, my understanding is that it's not beneficial to the brick. Prevents the brick from breathing. So what in fact is this material?
Yes, and there's more in the report, and perhaps Rodney can speak to this, but the idea of lime wash is that it does allow for the brick to breathe. So it is much healthier for the brick. It allows it to maintain really good condition. And someday, if ever needed to be removed, has that possibility as well.
And if I could just add to that, so if you look for lime wash, you can see it referred to as paint at sometimes, but it's not exactly paint, sir. Through you, Madam Chair, I'd advise the board that it is entirely breathable, and that's the part of the point, that it provides protection from rain and weathering while still allowing that breathability to prevent fungal and bacterial kind of situations, creating problems with the brick and its ability to maintain its structural integrity. So it's quite different than paint. And when you look at the standards and guidelines from Parks Canada that Mr. Nissan had referred to, it doesn't have, unfortunately, this type of more detailed discussion about a difference between lime wash and paint. It does refer to paint and other coatings. And while it's not recommended, I think, and as you'll see in our submission letter, there's other guidelines and policies within that within the standards and guidelines, which we believe we're supporting by applying a lime wash. So I think it's a more contextual evaluation under the standards and guidelines that's required.
Thank you very much. Do you have other questions of any of our speakers? Yes, Katerina.
Just for the question about the coating and the color of it, is there an alternative? So, such as like an invisible coat, if I may be ignorant in the coating of masonry, but is there other alternatives that may not alter the color of the masonry overall?
From my understanding, and again, I'm not holding myself as an expert on lime wash, but it's essentially you could get any color that a paint would be, but in terms of it being appearing invisible, I don't believe that's the case. Like there's always going to be a tint to it or a coloring.
Thank you. Other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for all of your time today. We now move on to questions of staff. Do we have questions of staff? Alex.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. I wonder if staff could comment, I think there was some comment in the report, but comment on other ways of protecting the masonry. So I believe there are some sort of clear coatings that can be put on, which will protect the masonry and also allow the colors to come through. I mean, I've seen some masonry walls which have been patched and seem to be quite beautifully repaired. Could you comment on an alternative to this lime wash, which I think is rather obtrusive, unfortunately?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. We don't support the coating of masonry. The standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada state that masonry repairs, alternative design solutions, or flashings must be considered before considering applying a masonry coating as a last resort.
So are you of the opinion that the wall, when repaired, will have a long lifetime without coating of any sort?
Unfortunately, I can't make a professional opinion on that. The staff report that's before us is only for the masonry coating. We're not aware of the condition of the masonry, but the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada notes that masonry repairs must be considered an alternatives before considering a masonry coating. And in the submission package, that hasn't been, from what we can see, it hasn't been considered.
Thank you.
Are there other questions of staff? I have one. I would imagine, is city staff sort of committed to continuing to work with the applicants to achieve a palatable solution for both sides?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Staff are working diligently amongst each other with the homeowners, with the community association to address the issue at this property. If the homeowners would like to work with staff with regards to masonry repairs, we welcome them to do that. How our discussions will go will be determined here at this TBD meeting, whether or not the board decides to move staff's recommendation to refuse this application for the coating of the masonry.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Amir. Is there discussion amongst ourselves?
Through you, Chair. I think the problem with painting is often, and I know this is a lime wash, which is breathable, but it's often the long-term effects of it. Over time, somebody might not be so considerate with their selection of paint, and another layer of paint gets applied, and it is slowly a death sentence for the building. I think it should be discouraged in almost all cases. So my thoughts there. And I think along those lines, using it as a method to kind of repair brick, there's so many kind of options for that. Like you can get kind of tinting, actually repairing, that will kind of make it just sit more seamlessly, cleaning as well. A whole range of options that can be looked at before you have to resort to something like that.
And to your point, we've got to consider reversibility of the treatments, which is another part of the standards and guidelines that we sort of need to hold in our hands. Is there other discussion? Yeah, Jeff.
Well, I find that painting a brick is becoming quite common, and it's quite unfortunate. It really does, contrary to what the individual said, I feel it does change the character. When you go from a red or a brown to something that is almost white, you've really completely changed the look of the building. So I am quite apart from the issue of permeability and the nature of the cladding. I think the color, I don't know why they can't be persuaded to, if they have to have a cladding, at least do something that matches the brick. Anyway, that was my sense of it.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we have a staff report with recommendations before us. Would anybody care to move the recommendations in the report? I'll move the staff recommendations. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on now to PB 18.7. We have a staff report available to us. Members, would you like to hear it? Yes, please and thank you. Hi, Georgia. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Georgia Cush. I'm the Senior Heritage Planner, and this report recommends refusal of the application to alter attributes of the property at 123 Winford Drive and to demolish a building and attributes under sections 33 and 34 of the Ontario Heritage Act. This application has been made in conjunction with an official plan and rezoning amendment application, which has been appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal with a hearing scheduled this summer. Next slide, please. The subject property, known as the Japanese Canadian Cultural Centre, is located on the south side of Winford Drive, just east of the Don Valley Parkway. And the aerial photo shows the site located within the Don Valley Ravine, which contains a two-story building, a designed landscape, a portion of the ravine, and a parking lot. Next slide, please. Now, the property was identified on the City of North York's 1997 Modernist Architecture Inventory, and it was listed on the North York Heritage Register that same year. Following amalgamation, the property was added to the City of Toronto's Heritage Register and then designated under Part 4 of the Heritage Act in September of last year. The designation bylaw is now in full force and effect. There's so much to say about this property because it contains a substantial amount of design, associative, and contextual heritage value. There is a brief summary of its heritage value in the report, but I encourage everyone to reread the excellent designation report prepared by my colleagues, Liz McFarland and Anna Martins, which provides a very thorough description and evaluation of the value of this important resource and really informed a lot of the conclusions in this report. So the property, including the building and the landscape, was designed by the celebrated and influential Canadian architect, Raymond Moriyama, who just passed away last year. The building was completed in 1963. Now, as we all know, Mr. Moriyama remains one of the most highly regarded Canadian architects of the 20th century, and he went on to design a number of other notable buildings at home and around the world, but this was his first major commission as a young architect. The Japanese Canadian Cultural Centre was conceived in the 1950s by a group of Japanese Canadians living in Toronto who wanted to establish a centre that would serve the community and be a living memorial to the optimistic spirit of the early Japanese immigrants to Canada, despite the racism and the persecution they unfortunately endured in this country. So the community fundraised and they scraped and they saved, and 75 of the original Japanese Canadian families living in Toronto acted as guarantors for a bank mortgage to fund this project. Next slide, please. The building and the designed landscape are nestled into the ravine lands, which you can see in these images taken from Winford Drive. Contextually, the relationship of the two-story building and the landscape provides continuity with the Don Valley Ravine. The property also maintains the character of the area, which features a number of high-quality designed cultural and institutional buildings in the Don Mills area. Next, please. The property is fully expressed through an understanding of the interrelationship of the building and its landscape in a very carefully considered design. The sliding doors, the deep low balconies, and the continuous floor and ceiling planes all blur the boundaries between interior and exterior spaces. The building is a unique example in Toronto of brutalist architecture with its carefully considered and meaningful design elements and the interrelationship with a landscape inspired by traditional Japanese garden design. Now, the next few photos show each of the elevations of the building, which is largely constructed of concrete and displays a high degree of craftsmanship and artistic merit. All 4 elevations are confirmed as attributes. So here we see the front and the rear walls of the building. Next slide, please. Here are the side walls, and notice the strong horizontal articulation, the proportions, and the building's relationship with the grade. Next, please. The building also includes important interior elements, including double-height central auditorium with wood screens, glazing, and a drop ceiling. And on the right, the lobby with its related features. Next, please. The landscape attributes include the slab stone sculpture on the left, which was designed by Mr. Moriyama and located in the forecourt north of the building. And of course, the interrelationship between the west elevation of the building, the flagstone terrace at the lower level, and the ravine landscape beyond are also among many of the attributes of this property. Also, a Japanese stroll garden and various other landscape elements are included and described in the designation bylaw. Next. Now, the applicant, with support from their heritage consultants at ERA Architects, proposes to demolish the entirety of the building, with the exception of the northwest corner pylon, disassemble the building parts from its current location, and reapply portions of the exterior and interior elements onto the base building of a new tower structure in a reconfigured manner. So that new tower structure is shown here as Building B. The new structure would be situated approximately 3.8 meters higher than the Heritage Building is currently situated. And a second 52-story tower, shown here as Building A, is proposed to be placed in the northwest corner of the site, which is currently a parking lot. The slab stone sculpture, I should say, which is designed by Raymond Moriyama, is also proposed to be demolished, removed, and reconstructed north of the new tower. The individual landscape and ravine elements, with the exception of the stone sculpture, appear to be proposed for retention and rehabilitation, but we don't have the details on that strategy. Through you, Madam Chair, I'm going to take a moment to remind the board that demolition is defined in the official plan as the complete destruction of a heritage structure and property from its site, including the disassembly of structures and properties on the Heritage Register for the purpose of reassembly at a later date. Next slide, please. This is a drawing and a detail of the proposed east elevation, and I'm sorry, but the detail is shown in parts because the drawings were submitted in sections. So after demolition, parts of the original building's wall elements would be applied to the new structure in a new configuration on a raised grade like I said earlier, approximately 3.8 meters. As well, the grade would slope down along the two sides of the new building towards the south end, creating an additional level to each of the side elevations and changing the proportions, which is inconsistent with the original design of the original building and site. Next, please. Here is the proposed west elevation, which also shows parts of the original building's elements applied to the new tower structure in a different configuration and with an additional level created. Next, please. The proposed north elevation of new building B shows parts of the demolished building elements reconstructed onto the new structure. The existing rear wall is demolished and replaced with new construction. The building's interior heritage attributes are also proposed for demolition and partial reconstruction within the new building. Next, please. Here is a rendering of the proposal, and as you can see, the impact to this important cultural heritage resource is immense. It would result in the complete loss of the celebrated building and sculpture by Raymond Moriyama and its inextricable relationship with the design landscape and the ravine. Next slide. This property was sensitively designed to represent the optimism of the Japanese Canadian community, and that connection would be greatly diminished in this scheme, as would its value as a physical and cultural landmark in the city. The application of parts of the demolished building onto a new tower as proposed in no way mitigates the full demolition of this building and the loss of the values and attributes of the property as a whole. In addition, this application does not comply with any relevant municipal or provincial heritage policies and therefore should be refused. Thank you.
Sorry for breaking in, everyone. I've just got a text from Julia saying that her internet went out. Paul, I'm wondering if you could take over chairing the meeting. Oh, Paul, we can't hear you quite yet.
Sorry about that. Matthew, I understand we have speakers on this item. I don't have them in front of me. Can you just tell me who the speakers are?
Yes, 1 second. Let me just pull it up again. Our speaker on this item is Lynn Ducher Kobayashi.
Okay, Lynn, I see you there. Please proceed. You have 5 minutes, and I'll warn you when you get to about 4 minutes and a half.
Okay, thank you. I just want to thank Georgia for a really wonderful presentation. I am speaking on behalf of those who wish to preserve in whole the original Japanese Canadian Cultural Center. Author Kerry Sakamoto said in a Globe article, "May the original Japanese Canadian Cultural Center endure as a monument to the history and spiritual redemption of our community." It's my responsibility and honor to represent the Toronto chapter of the National Association of Japanese Canadians as president. The NHAC negotiated the $450 million redress agreement from the federal government and the recent $100 million settlement from BC. These agreements speak to the breadth of injustices to our community. The original Japanese Canadian Cultural Center at 123 Winford Drive played a pivotal role in healing from the trauma of dispossession and exile in one's own country. In 1941, more than 21,000 Japanese Canadians lived in British Columbia and 234 in Ontario. By 1948, nearly 8,000 had been forcibly displaced to Ontario, and there were more Japanese Canadians in Ontario than in BC. My great-grandparents came to Canada 124 years ago. In 1942, my grandparents lost their dry cleaning business in Vancouver. My grandfather was subject to forced labor on a BC highway to work on a BC highway. And during the war, my grandparents on both sides were interned, and my parents. After the war, they could not return to their home and were forced to move east. They hoped to settle in Toronto, but ended up in Montreal because the city of Toronto banned Japanese Canadians from the city in 1942. My grandmother moved to Toronto in 1953 after my grandfather's death, and she established a successful dressmaking business. She became involved in the community life that was developing in Toronto. She was one of the 75 guarantors who put second mortgages on homes and businesses to make the miracle of the original Japanese Canadian Cultural Centre happen. It served up as a safe space where shattered identities, grief, and hope could come together. It was a healing space with a vision of a better future for their descendants. The original center is distinct from the current beautifully renovated site in that it was built for purpose from the grounds to the exterior and interior. By the early 1960s, a fundraising appeal had 1,500 families donating $300,000, and these were families stripped of everything 20 years earlier. Most were not immigrants, they were Canadian citizens or naturalized citizens. Another layer of significance, of course, is the genius of Raymond Moriyama, whose architecture of inclusion reflects his family's experience of injustice. When he started his company in 1958, he was told that nobody would hire a goddamn Jap. This spurred him on to prove otherwise. While Moriyama never presumed to speak for the community, he is our architect hero who cleared the hurdles of racism to achieve international acclaim. Cultural objects achieve meaning through social interactions, and meaning accrues over time. We are grateful that the Heritage Planning Department of Toronto recognized this in their thorough designation report. While the Heritage Impact Assessment submitted by the developer's consultant did recommend heritage designation, it was extremely narrow in scope, and this troubles us. Aspects of our history integral to context and meaning were missed due to the absence of community consultation. This report leaves the door open to a superficial interpretation of what heritage means. For example, that merely maintaining the facade is sufficient, and smothering the cultural center under a 48-story condo tower with a twin tower beside it is acceptable. When Moriyama graduated from high school, his family had no money. Upon graduation,
Just a reminder, you're coming to up to your time.
His classmates received material gifts, but his dad handed him an envelope with a handwritten note urging him to drive a single nail of gold into the temple of eternity. He has done this, and I believe that all his work deserves UNESCO World Heritage designation. This is a very important building that should be preserved in whole.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paul, for stepping in as my internet went cuckoo bananas. I'm sorry I couldn't say good morning to you, Ms. Kobayashi. Thank you so much for speaking. Do we have any questions of our speaker this morning?
Thank you so much, Lynn. That was a wonderful testament to the building. I'm wondering, you mentioned right at the end about UNESCO commemoration. Is that an active file right now? Is that a possibility? It
No,
certainly
but
would be a great idea.
I just think that this is something that it should be looked into, because Frank Lloyd Wright, all his buildings are designated UNESCO World Heritage Site, even some that are privately owned. And I just think this would be, it has to start at the city level and then go to the province and then go to the federal government, right? But I just think this could be like a triple win for everybody. I mean, I don't think Toronto or Ontario has many UNESCO World Heritage Site designations, but I just think that, he's designed the embassy in Japan. He's done work in the National Museum, Saudi National Museum. I just have to say to myself, what do you have to do the Scarborough Civic Center, the Toronto Reference Library, the Ottawa Museum, the Canadian War Museum, this
And the Ontario Science Center.
Ontario Science Center, and the architects have, been doing a wonderful job of recognizing the significance. But yeah, it's just, I just think that everyone could work together in a really positive way to, and of course, unlike Frank Lloyd Wright, I have looked into this, he had everything going against him. His dad had been in not just a internment camp, but an actual prisoner of war camp, along with the German Italian internees. So, it's just really a remarkable story, his story, and it's really a remarkable story of, a community coming together with optimism to, create something remarkable. And fortunately, he's been able to concretely embody that expression of community. I mean, the New York Times has referred to his work as designer of humane public spaces. And I just think this is, Alex Bozikovic in the Globe recently referred to the what's being proposed for the cultural center, original cultural center, as it's being, Frankenstein into a condo tower.
Yeah, thank you very much. Do we have other questions of our speaker? Seeing none, we'll move on to questions of city staff. Do we have any for Georgia? Seeing none. Do we have any discussion amongst ourselves? Seeing that, oh yes, Jeff.
Well, I'd just like to say that I've experienced the Japanese Center not as the Japanese Canadian Cultural Center, but as the Noor Center. It was a Muslim center for many years, and there was many public events held there, open to people of any faith or none, which it allowed me certainly to enjoy that center very much. The point there is it's been a public center, it's been a public building forever, and it's really unfortunate to see it actually to be part of a condo scheme. It's actually very sad. It very much is a public building, and it's part of this cultural corridor extending over to the Ontario Science Center, which has become, which we're in danger of losing that whole concept in that part of the city. Very important. So I think maybe we as a board can add another motion to request that the city take a primary role in nominating the building for a World Heritage Site.
If you're so, as an amendment to this, I think I'm not opposed, but I think we want to keep our matters straight. And what we have is the recommendations before us, and then that would be, I think, a separate discussion point.
Sure.
Because I think it is a good way forward, but I'm not sure what the path towards that and whether that would happen at the city or through UNESCO itself. So I think maybe we want to think about that.
Well, somebody has to be a nominator, right? And it could be the city. So why not?
It could be the city. Okay. But as I say, I think we want to keep that component perhaps separate from what the recommendations that we're talking about today. That would be my opinion. So
you don't want to accept a motion along that lines?
I think we need to work with, we can work with sort of clerk's office, and you're right, because it needs to be attached to something. As I say, it's just.
Well, I can draft something, send it to staff, and we'll go from there.
Okay. All right, then why don't we then move on to the next item as we figure this one out? Okay, moving on to PB 18.8 and the listing reports and inclusion on the register. And I think we have a staff report from Gary, which I think maybe we'd like to hear today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gary Miedema. I'm a project manager with Heritage Planning, and I am pleased to present this report to you today. I will note and thank Lindsay Parsons for the hard work behind this listing, as well as Liz McFarland for helping with the listing as well. Next slide, please. The two subject properties are located on the south side of Dundas Street West between Pacific Avenue and High Park Avenue, and you can see them outlined in red, in the Junction area neighborhood within the Junction Phase 1 Heritage Conservation District study. Staff have undertaken research and evaluation for the properties and believe that the properties have cultural heritage value or interest and meet at least one of the criteria prescribed in Ontario Regulation 906 for including a non-designated property on your municipal register under Section 27 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The properties have design value as representative examples of early 20th century two-story Main Street commercial road type buildings with distinctive detailing. And contextually, both properties are important in defining, maintaining, and supporting the predominantly late 19th and early 20th century character of Dundas Street West, the commercial core of the Junction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have two speakers registered on this item. The first that I have on the list is Diana. Diana, are you here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, and you have 5 minutes, and I'll give an indication of when your time is nearly up.
Okay, I just wanted to, I'll be very brief actually. I just wanted to say that this is a truly one-of-a-kind pair of storefronts, making a unique contribution to the Dundas West Business District. And I can truthfully say there's nothing else like it in the city of Toronto, and it's a triumph of vernacular design. So that's my presentation.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Diana? Seeing none, we also have Vincent. Good morning, sir. You have 5 minutes.
Hi, thank you very much. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee and staff. My name is Vincent Santamora, and I'm Principal Architect with Vincent J. Santamora Architect, Inc., 23 Parnell Crescent, Whitby, Ontario, L1R2L4, 905-668-9207, vjs@vjsarch.ca. I'm a registered architect with the Ontario Association of Architects and member of the Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals as a building specialist. I've worked on many projects of a heritage nature in the GTA and in Toronto specifically, including the rehabilitation of the Syrian Orthodox Church on Woodlawn Avenue south of St. Clair, and the rehabilitation of the Vincent Massey Public School in Etobicoke into a daycare, and even brought a little bit of Bath, England to Walmer Road at the foot of Casa Loma. And before you today, on behalf of Rama Jamal Group, who are the property owners and tenants of 2291, 2293 Dundas Street West, as the board considers the addition of the property to the Heritage Register. I understand you are in receipt of the group's correspondence opposing the listing of the property, and I wish to speak further on this matter. As you know, these are trying times for us in the heritage field, as recent provincial legislation proposes to delist any property not designated by January 1st, 2025. Any properties of potential heritage value will become exposed to development forces, but we mustn't lose our heads. While in this state, we mustn't rush to protect and designate just any property. We need to remain thoughtful, reasoned, and deliberate as we evaluate the heritage of our communities and choose those of significant value that will benefit the public interest. It is a delicate balance between the public good and individual landowners' rights. I encourage the board to select those properties which have a strong presence in the community and emotional connections to it in terms of architecture, collected common memory, and prominent location in the city. The property at 2991 and 2993 Dundas Street West, while a solid built member of the urban fabric, does not rise to the level of significant. Its architecture is simple, and its contribution to the streetscape is largely that of a supporting role. A lot of change has occurred along Dundas Street West as it evolves naturally over time. And while it has lost heritage value, it remains good urban design and scale. And these design concerns can be capably managed by the urban design section of planning. As such, its heritage value is low. Its design is typical, but not significant. It doesn't rise to the level of public heritage interest. Just like the building, the current tenants at the property have been good, solid members of the community. Solnick and Solnick lawyers have been serving the community for over 55 years and carry on the tradition of good community service. Nothing flashy, but good, honest work. In closing, with a reasoned assessment of the potential heritage value of the property, its value is low and does not warrant addition to the Heritage Register as a listed property. As its heritage value is low and meets maybe just one of the required criteria of the Ontario regulations under the Heritage Act, its ability to rise to that of significant to be designated within 2 years is also low. I respectfully request the board's support for Mudgemel's request not to list the property. Thank you for the opportunity to address you, and I'm available for any questions you may have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions of our speaker? Seeing none, do we have any questions of staff? Thank you very much for your time this morning, sir. Seeing no questions of staff, any discussion amongst ourselves? Seeing none, we have a report with recommendations before us. Does anybody care to move the recommendations in that report? Paul, all those in favor? Motion carries. Back to 123 Winford, as we figure a few things out. Jeff, have you submitted something there? Because I think there is some not concern. I think the process of a nomination is not clear. It might not be a city process, so we could request, city council to ask staff like how and why a UNESCO heritage report comes forward, but I don't think it's necessarily related to the recommendations that we have in this report. It's a separate issue, and I'm at least after, just quickly, I'm not sure it's the city that nominates for UNESCO.
I've submitted a proposed nomination and to Andrew.
Okay. So we just need to wait for a moment to see how things sort of come up then.
Okay. Sorry, you're asking for the motion?
Jeff, want to continue to proceed with this one?
Yep.
Just as I say, and I think what we can then do is we can ask of this and have discussion and maybe seek some clarification then too.
Sorry, Madam Chair, this is on me. I'm just going to take one quick look before we put it up here.
You don't want to fix grammar in real time with us? That looked about right to you, Jeff?
Perfect.
All right, so the amendment that's before us reads that the Toronto Preservation Board recommend that City Council request Heritage Planning to report on how the City of Toronto can nominate the former Japanese Canadian Cultural Centre, 123 Winford Drive, as a UNESCO World Heritage Site and report to the appropriate standing committee. Do we have any discussion on the amendment? Paul?
Just as a matter of wordsmithing, I wonder if it, rather than saying how the city can nominate, how the city can support the nomination of, because I think that would give it a little more momentum if it turns out the city is not the primary agent in nominating.
Jeff, does that sound about right to you?
That sort of implies a secondary role for the city. I don't know why the city couldn't have a primary role in that. Maybe your alternate word, either support or, you know, as appropriate. Put some weasel words in there.
Paul, what do you think?
Well, maybe won't argue it for long, but maybe advance the nomination or can contribute to the creation and advancement of something like that. I take Jeff's point. You don't want the city to leave it to someone else.
And while perhaps unconventional, I see Tamara, you've joined us, and perhaps to help us with our wordsmithing, you might speak to the process.
So I've been involved with two nominations for World Heritage. But just so that there's an understanding, first the property has to be a National Historic Site. A National Historic Site nomination, it requires, according to Parks Canada, that there is owner consent for it to be considered a National Historic Site. And then the Parks Canada, their World Heritage Secretariat, every 10 years or so have opened the process for creating the Canadian tentative list. That was done, I think, around 2016. I was involved with the nomination from a previous role that I had at the province. So I would go as much to say that it's seeking a federal process of Parks Canada to get more information, as opposed to having even the ability to either sponsor or to support someone else's nomination. But I'm just coming in late because I was at community council, but maybe if I saw the wording again, I apologize. I could give you some guidance.
Thank you. So we're seeing the wording. I'm just going to let this take a moment for everybody.
Or maybe the wording is actually open enough. that what Mara says would work.
Mhm.
How they can advance? Well, you have to talk to the federal government, right?
The amendment is seeking yet its process.
I'm just not sure which appropriate standing committee would be the correct one for doing this.
Housing.
I'd added that in there partially because it's City Council would ask for a report back to Standing Committee. It just gives us not so much some time, but maybe just see what the report's actually recommending. If it's intergovernmental, then that might be Executive Committee. If it is provincial, maybe.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with that in background, Paul, are you the wording for you, does that work, or would you
Yes.
still like it to be different?
I think it's fine as is.
Okay. Jeff, you're content?
I might just add or suggest it could
Yes.
be can advance or support a nomination.
I would be very supportive of that tweak. Jeff?
Absolutely.
Sorry, Matthew, you do get to correct it in real time.
It's already done.
There we have it. So as we have it, I'm going to read it out again, that the Toronto Preservation Board recommend that City Council request Heritage Planning to report on how the City of Toronto can advance or support the nomination of the former Japanese Canadian Cultural Centre at 123 Winford Drive as a UNESCO World Heritage Site and report to the appropriate standing committee. Do we have any other discussion on this amendment? So, because you've advanced it, Jeff, you've moved this amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Motion carries. We now have staff recommendation. Oh,
Yep,
please.
you've
we
got
need
it.
to record this one.
Yep. No. You don't have to. It is. I just want to remind you, item as amended as well.
Yes. Yeah. I was actually on top of that one today. Everything else might fall off, but we now have a staff report as amended. Is there any discussion? Would anybody care to move the recommendations as amended? Jeff? All those in favor?
Do we have a recorded vote, Madam Chair?
Do you want a recorded vote?
Yes,
Matthew?
please.
Okay, so we can do a recorded vote.
Okay, Madam Chair, if you want to ask for in favor and opposed, then just read out the names.
Perfect. All those in favor? Julia, Paul, Jeff, Matthew, Mitchell, Kurosh, Alex, Katerina, is your hand up or no?
I'm just gonna think about it. I think it's just too rush, yeah.
Okay. So you've got about 10 more seconds to think before I ask if you're opposed. I think I've got everybody else's name, so you can lower your hands. All right.
Sure. Yeah.
And Katerina.
Madam Chair, that is 8 in favor.
And the motion carries.
Carries.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody. That brings us to the end of our agenda. We finished before 11 o'clock today, which is different from our March meetings. Thank you so very much for your time this morning, and I will see everybody in June. Take care.